Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Live with Rubis and Friends. During this podcast, this live podcast, actually, we talk about things that advance people in the context of the workplace. How do we make the workplace and people thrive better? And by focusing on leadership and culture, and we think it's really important to have a conversation on those topics. And joining me every week, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Mountain time will be Kelly Schindel and Mary Koo, along with the producer of this particular podcast and my co-author of my blog, Garrett Rubis, and also Christina Lau, who works with us in the background around making all this come together. And the four of these folks bring a different perspective to these topics, and I like to kind of kick it off by kind of creating a theme or a concept, and we refer back to the blogs that I've written over the last few weeks as a kind of a way of stimulating the conversation. And so welcome, everybody. Great to have you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So, and so probably for people that don't know everybody, so we're gonna maybe start with just a quick introduction of everybody really quickly, so you can put a name to a face. The theme of this particular live podcast, as it were, is try and keep all your original parts, and I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. But Kelly, why don't you just say a few things about yourself and about a couple of the things that have been on your mind since you've kind of been poking around, looking at my blogs or some other things regarding the workplace or leadership and culture over the last few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Schindel. Some things to know about me. I live in the beautiful city of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and had the good fortune to work with 4/5 of the people here at various points. And some things that have been kind of colliding around in my brain right now and over the last couple weeks is the idea, the more I read about things or hear about things or experience things at work, is what happens when rights collide. And that's a word I lifted kind of from my daughter's grade 5 parent-teacher interview yesterday, when they were talking about what they're starting to do in social studies, and they're looking at when rights collide. And I just
let's come back to that, Kelly. That sounds very interesting. And and Mary, say something about yourself and something that's been on your mind.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Koo. Something about myself. I like to do lots of activities. For example, I'm also part of a bowling league on Sunday nights, which is what I'm going to go to right after this podcast.
Yeah.
Very random, I know, but I just like to do activities. In terms of what's been on mind for the past few weeks is just, I think just creating that awareness, and for certain topics of certain things, I think some topics are maybe more like hush hush, or people aren't really willing to speak up on it, but we're really just going to break that boundary and just talk about it and be very honest, and also call BS on certain things that we think are BS.
Completely agree. Thank you very much. And Christina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Luo. I'm a student, and I'm immersed in the workplace life and just learning so much about culture along the way. And one thing on my mind has just been blurring the line between that whole rigid workplace and personal life separation, and making sure that you're embedding the two of them together, because you do spend so much time at work. So might as well ensure that you're taking care of yourself and your well-being along the way.
Yeah. Okay. Let's come back to that for sure. And Garrett, who, by the way, a lot of you know, is my son. So hi, Garrett.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Garrett Rubis. Live in Austin, Texas. I work in the customer service industry. My client's 7-Eleven, and right now, I'm just focusing every day and kind of developing personal leadership among the team, and figuring out how to better educate myself in terms of how that goes in the work environment.
All right, fantastic. And we'll kind of jump right in. So keeping all the original body parts. So, some of you may know, or I think all of you that all my friends know, that I'm sitting here recovering from knee replacement surgery. And as I was reflecting on that, and it's given me a lot of time to reflect on it because there's a fair amount of recovery time there. It's a major operation, even though they do it every day. And I wrote a blog called "Keep Your Original Parts." And you know, I was thinking that kind of maybe connecting with some of your comment there, Christina, that you know, we're intended to keep our original body parts. I know that science and health and bioscience have advanced. That thank goodness we can do the kind of thing that I just did, is to get an actual brand new knee, which is pretty amazing. But really, I think we're intended to keep our parts. And organizations, on the other hand, are in the business often of replacing parts. And even though all business is personal, and I think that ends up in a contradiction at times, where people are put in this situation where they have to choose their well-being sometime, or they feel like they have to choose their well-being in order to stay current, or stay employed, or to stay current, or to stay of value. And I think that takes us to a bad place. And I think that takes us to a place later on that's not sustainable, where if we keep putting off what our body's saying to us, we're going to have to eventually replace a body part sometime. And that's a good story when you can do that. And so, and of course, the organization goes on, not while it can be compassionate, has the responsibility to continue to do what's best for the organization. And that keeps it distant from the very fact that you've got people attached to it that have to go through that particular experience. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and get a reaction from you guys around, why do you think that's the case? And is that just me, or do you think, have you guys ever felt that way, where, you know, you feel like you've had to, even though you're at various points in your career, you've had to, I don't know, you're not always making the best choices around investing in yourself versus the organization? Next topic. What do you guys think? Is that just me, or do you think that my observation, or what do you think about that premise?
No, I think it's something that I have struggled with for sure, and have tried to be more mindful of probably over the last year or so. Some things have changed with my work and my role, and it's meant different things as far as my availability, or what is this work-life balance, and how do those work together. And I think it's caused me to be a little more mindful and a little more willing to really try to objectively evaluate my presence in different.
Yeah. And so here are some indications why I think, although I'm using a more extreme example, this is still relevant and prevalent in organizations. Because if we really felt that people ought to put themselves first, for example, to re-energize themselves and to look after themselves, don't you think you'd walk through a lot of organizations on an afternoon and see a lot of people napping? That would be a natural thing that people would do. Mm-hmm. Like, don't you think that, and how many people do you know take an afternoon nap at the workplace, or that make that as a regular habit?
I knew pregnant ladies who did that, but they used to do it quietly and only if their boss said it was okay, and they'd set aside a little, but otherwise none.
No, think about that. You only do that if your boss says it's okay.
Yeah.
And if you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you guys ever come in the afternoon, just felt like you just wanted to close your eyes for about 10 or 15 minutes?
Yes.
Oh,
No.
Well, why wouldn't the hell we do it? And I just don't get it. And so I kind of wonder around, organizations talk a good tune around the whole being and looking after your wellness and taking care of yourself. And yet I'm wondering if we still kind of applaud people that actually kind of demonstrate that they go beyond that they, I'm wondering if we still have too much people paying attention to, how many hours somebody's working, and I just wonder if we've got a little bit out of whack.
Yeah, and I'd also just like to touch point is, if it's something physical like that, it's obvious, right? If you see somebody that's pregnant, you'll understand that they're tired or their feet are swollen, or Lauren, if you're limping around because you need a new knee, like that's obvious. But also, on the other hand, is just, people's mental health as well, because you can't just see that and see that maybe they're struggling or being overwhelmed. So noticing that it is keeping your original parts, but also being mindful that there's original parts that people can take care of, but also that's just can't physically.
So would you, this is talking a little bit out of school, but would you be surprised if someone that suggested to me that because I was going to get a knee replacement, I ought to do that outside of ATP because I'd just be mailing it in if I did that while I was at work?
Oh,
That wouldn't surprise you? Or
no,
would-
it would surprise me.
Yeah, well, that's a true statement. So, I mean, I'm just in the spirit of being honest here about, we said no bullshit, right, on this discussion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's still way too much fear in organizations around, trying to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Garrett, what's the guy that you really like that has a company in Austin called?
Aubrey, the audiobook you sent me, Aubrey Marcus.
Yeah, Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey
Yeah,
Marcus.
I won't say I totally love the guy, but he's generally interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah. So this is not an Aubrey Marcus
Promotion.
advertisement, but like he talks about the importance of his company where, people shut it down.
Pretty sure everybody on it can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And it's a results driven environment where you put the work, it's just they know if you put the work in or not. It doesn't matter when or how, just do it.
Yeah, and I love that philosophy, and I think we're emerging more. Certainly, at the organization that I was at, that was prevalent, and we're getting I think that's been pretty much embedded. But I just still think that, my observation is that it's still tricky and I think for those of you that are early in your career, it's a little less onerous because you're more resilient, and I think it just accumulates over a period of time. And I'm quote retired, and I was just thinking, I'm not saying that if I'd have paid more attention to it, I'd still have my knee, but probably, yeah, I probably would. And but it was my ego that got in the way. I think sometime I didn't want to think. First of all, I think I could, suck it up. Sometime I thought that I could, that it was so important. My work was so important that I couldn't miss it. And so I kept putting it off. And I think if you put things off long enough from your personal point of view, they catch up with you. And I just think that just needs to be more open conversation in companies. And so that's my argument. And maybe we beat that one up and up. Kelly, you intrigued me with your right clash thing. What's all that about? What are you thinking there?
Well, originally when my daughter and I first started talking about it, they started, small and saying, well, what, somebody's right to privacy as well as a right to security, and how does that work in airports? And then I started to think about where those things kind of collide in the workplace. And I was thinking about, I don't think it's necessarily new, but it's come up on my radar again, the whole idea of companies and their wellness packages, and having some employees wear, Fitbits, and that if you decide not to wear a Fitbit, then you either have to pay a penalty or you pay more for your insurance versus folks who opt in to wear the Fitbit. And what does that look like from a right to privacy, but also a right for insurers to feel like, it's kind of like that. Do you tick the box saying you're a smoker? And if you do, you pay more, which I think people are kind of comfortable with because like, oh, smoking's bad. But what happens when you're asked to wear something that tracks your health in a more sustainable way? So that kind of, I don't know where I fall on it, but it just intrigues me.
Do you think that's emerging to be a sort of something that's going to be a compulsory kind of thing, Kelly, where people are going to say, wear your Fitbit, or you're going to pay more for your health insurance premium or something like that?
I think so. I think the idea of wearables, first from a fitness perspective and the allure of that from a personal consumer, how do you monetize that or help safeguard that from a corporate enterprise perspective, and how could they use that? Yeah, I for sure think so.
Wow. What do you guys think about that? Would you guys wear one if a company said, look, we care about you. We want you to, we want you to be able to count your steps. We want to have you have all the data back. You're going to know where your blood pressure is, blah, blah, blah. These things become more sophisticated. And we want you to wear one because we want you to get the biofeedback, and, you can choose not to, but, unfortunately your healthcare premium will be up a little bit higher if you don't. What's your take on it?
I personally, I would wear one. I think we need to kind of be a lot more vocal and, about our health and our well-being. We only have our one body, so we definitely need to take care of it. But what Kelly just said reminded me, at the workplace that I'm at, they don't do it anymore, but if you went to the gym 5 or more times, you would actually pay less for your membership versus if you went twice a month. So it's kind of a little bit of motivation, I think, just to kind of get people interested and hopefully kind of get that buzz around it and get more people actually doing it.
Yeah. So, yeah, any other takes on this?
So I find that a little creepy, just a bit of like invasion of privacy. And I also feel like, if you're looking to help people improve their wellness, is steps really the way to do that? Some people, if you're meditating, if you're doing yoga, if you're doing something that doesn't require the tracking of steps, how do you also prove that you've been keeping well or eating well? It's not just through steps. So I'm a little wary of that. And also just having your employer know, number of steps, your heart rate throughout the times of the day, that's, to me, is a little bit creepy.
Yeah, me too. I wouldn't, if I was the chief people officer of a company, I wouldn't take it. I'd say, you know what? We're going to do everything we can to encourage people and provide every possible way, including providing Fitbits for people that want it. But I'm a bigger fan of creating conditions for people to participate than using the carrot or the stick to make them do it. Because I think those are the wrong reasons. I think it starts to create more fear.
Yeah, I think it's all about the incentive, not the deduction. Because once you penalize, that makes it to a point where there's pressure. Because I'd be all for wearing a Fitbit or something if the work provided it for me, but I wouldn't. The idea that then you would be penalized if you didn't, that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. So
you have the idea of a perk, that's excellent.
Yeah.
But when it says if you don't, you're in trouble, that's when you get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, so I'm glad you kicked that off, Kelly, because I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of thing about where we're going to have, but we got a long way to go. I'm reading this book called, that was sent to me by our daughter, kind of my convalescing book, and it's called Blood, and it's about this, a very current story. It reads like a novel about Theranos, this company that was a Silicon Valley supernova that burnt out and went completely bust. But they were worth, they had a huge market cap of about $500 million, but they ended up still kind of tracking people when they were coming in. If you didn't work weekends, you were berated. There's still lots of places that we still fill time cards up, for God's sake. So we got a lot of work to do in organizations to go and expect people to be fully functional adults to go and contribute.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to move to another topic.
Cool.
So this is, I wrote this blog called Microdosing.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of a clickbait kind of a concept. And I was, it was kind of originally, obviously, it's around microdosing on psychedelic drugs.
It worked.
But
I clicked.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did. But, I began to think about the larger notion of microdosing as a way of thinking big, starting small, but acting now. And because I'm wondering if sometime the way we could really move organizations and ourselves personally further is to microdose. Like, if we were going to start mindfulness, sometime we kind of feel like, oh gosh, we've got to take the whole package. We've got to go and we've got to be meditating X amount, or we've got to doing, or if we want to have a gratitude practice, we've got to do X amount. And I'm wondering if you could take that idea and just settle in on a number of things that moved you forward every day and just microdosed and just did little bits of it. And so I want to throw that idea out there to you guys and see what you think.
I think so when I first read your blog post, obviously I focus more on the microdosing of drugs part. But I obviously read further to the analogy of taking things into smaller pieces at work. And then I was trying to think of, what that would look like for me. And it's that whole, and I've heard it said a lot, and I think I've said it before, like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. It's something I do struggle with, taking things that are big and then finding a place to start with them without just being too caught up in how big they are. So I definitely think I need to do more of that. But I don't know. I find it hard, I think, to be even mindful about the mindfulness or mindful about taking things smaller. I'm just like, oh, wait, but this is so big and I need to go from like 0 to 100. And it's something I struggle with for sure.
What about other folks? What do you guys think?
I think it's pretty fascinating, personally. Like, I believe that in the next 10 years or so, there will be places to microdose that are unlike wineries, where a Napa trip will include a Sunday afternoon where you go and microdose.
So you're actually talking about the drug component. You're not talking
Yeah,
about...
I am.
Oh, wow.
But also, I am, but also, therefore, breaking it down to the idea of also bringing it to that point where you're just being that mindful and kind of open up to that degree where you're thinking to that level.
I think we're a long way from organizations sponsoring microdose.
I don't think we are.
Wow. Okay. What about other people's reaction to that? That's pretty far out there.
I think it's a great way to almost build your tolerance, or when you want to try to build a habit for something, instead of thinking, if you're going to start exercising, that you have to start by lifting like 100-pound weights from day one, just slowly starting to build that up, but also bringing in the technique of chunking or anchoring. So as you're building up this one habit, tying it in with, let's say, it's doing calf raises while you're brushing your teeth. So tying those two habits together, and then as you're microdosing and building up your capacity, your tolerance for more and more, it's really being ingrained into your daily routine.
I love that idea, and I think that's brilliant. And I think that's where this starts to work, Christina, where you start thinking about combining things systemically. So you start microdosing in a variety of things together, and all of a sudden you find that you're making you make a lot of progress when you look back. Because I think, like Kelly, to your point, I think the hard part sometimes is starting, right? It's like it can feel so overwhelming, and it's just like you go, shit, like, where do I begin? And we know the story about one piece of the elephant at a time. We know that, but I think we procrastinate, and I think and I think we're afraid sometimes to just take small little steps. What about you, Mary? What do you do?
I actually agree with Kelly. I think it's a good concept to actually, start small and kind of work your way through whatever it is that you have going on. But I kind of do a million things at once. It's just kind of who I am as a person. So it's hard for me to take a moment and step back. And this goes hand in hand with keeping original parts and kind of wellness and all of that. So it's hard for me to take a step back and, what do I actually need to microdose to be able to accomplish what it is that I'm trying to do?
And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because microdosing to me is not doing a whole bunch of, not being really activity based without intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
It's being very intentional about what you want to microdose on. And then to, back to Christina's point a little bit, it's then the idea of then doing it and starting to see things reinforce each other, so that started to build a little bit of a system towards, you go, well, look at how much progress I've made on all this stuff, because I started out and I built this sort of habit up that's connected. Now, Garrett's idea of microdosing, actually, psychedelics and other stuff, is another topic for another time.
It's all the same lines. It really is.
I feel like you guys need to make a bet or something.
I mean, we brought up Aubrey Marcus earlier. I know that guy does it.
Well, I know, and Tim Ferriss said that.
And Tim Ferriss and these guys, they're all doing it. Like, it's all Silicon Valley. It's not that crazy.
I know you're not. It just feels like a bit out there, like where these guys are microdosing with psychedelics. I know they are, and with and how what's going to happen then with we're going to see it evolve here in Canada first around marijuana. It's kind of an interesting.
It's going to become like wineries. Like, you're going to get expensive strains of marijuana that are going to be have all different types of effects on you, and it's going to be like wineries in the next 10 years.
So maybe we'll connect that to keeping our original parts. I don't know. Maybe we can.
Well, yeah. I guess the mind is a different story, right? So, yeah. You're expanding your original parts, I guess, in a lot of ways with that.
And maybe the psychedelic part is a good place to start, or the microdosing with drugs is a good place to start to segue to kind of what we might want to each call BS on, or just something that's really kind of been on our minds. But before I do any other further, so we've talked about a couple of things around one, the importance of really, organizations allowing people to really attend to their wellness in a complete way, and it's not. They really have to. Organizations have to be more intentional about it. You just can't declare it because people on their own, I think, still feel a lot of pressure to kind of maybe not be as self-aware as possible, and that we ought to support that. And the idea and the power of microdosing is a concept of, moving things forward in ourselves and even in organizations by taking small chunks of things and then connecting together with all small chunks and then moving forward. And then, Kelly, you also kind of raised that part around kind of, we want to make sure we provide conditions for people to thrive. We don't want to be punitive and have this collision of rights and organizations invading our privacy. So now any other comments before we move to kind of the Let's Call BS section?
Nope.
Let's go.
All right. Who wants to start? Let's Call BS.
I think you should.
Yeah. So to me, I really, this has been a real self-awareness thing for me about being kind of, going through this major surgery and everything. And I don't mean this in the context of I can't change the past. But I do think that I need to be more thoughtful about being a leader that is setting a better example for people around looking after my whole self. And I think if I had a chance to do some things over again as a leader, both for myself and for others, I think I could have been the best example of making a contribution and doing all the right things for the organization and creating greatness, but also been a better mentor and a leader of how to encourage people to take care of themselves.
What are you calling BS on?
I'm calling BS I'm calling BS on my own behavior around talking a good tune, around looking after myself and keeping all my original parts, but not setting the best example as a leader in the previous roles that I've had. Mm-hmm. And I'm putting a challenge out to all leaders to be more thoughtful and mindful of it.
All right.
That's really good.
Anybody else have one?
I do. I'm thinking about an order here, but I want to call BS on time cards, especially in small companies. I think that if you're a good leader and you're a good manager or whatever, you're able to kind of observe and make your own interpretations in terms of how long people are there and what they're doing when they're there. And I don't think for a company that has less than a few thousand employees that you need that time cards are necessary at all. I think that you should be able to take responsibility and observe your own team and say, hey, is this person putting in their work? Are they doing what they need to be doing? And are they getting the results done? And if If not, I don't care to the minute how long they're necessarily there.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I think, frankly, if your company has time cards, you shouldn't go work for them, period. That's the way I think about it.
All right.
I feel that strongly about it. Okay, good for throwing it out there. Who else got one?
I call BS on, and it's kind of related to the whole idea of napping at work, but places at a place of work that are built to kind of promote a culture, like if you have nap pods or if you have open collaborative spaces, but then building those things and using it as an attractant, but in a collaborative space having shushers or in nap pods and having, people not use them because they're worried about what it might look like. So it's that kind of cart before the horse of cool